At 13, I was abandoned at a gas station. My wealthy uncle took me in. 15 years later, those same parents reappeared, suddenly acting like family, with smug smiles like I'd been waiting for them all along. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the type to post here, but after everything that went down, I kinda need to put it somewhere. Let's just say when I was 13, my parents pulled something so trashy, it basically rewired how I looked at family forever. I got taken in by someone who actually gave a damn about me. And years later, those same parents tried crawling back into my life when they thought there was money on the table. What happened next is still wild to think about. Growing up, I didn't exactly win the lottery when it came to parents. Thomas and Ruth Morrison, my mom and dad, were the kind of people you'd cross the street to avoid. They weren't evil masterminds or anything dramatic like that, just pathetic excuses for adults who never figured out how to be parents. They were always yelling about something: bills, each other, me. Didn't matter if I got good grades or if I kept my head down, they'd find a reason to scream at me. Food? That was optional. Some nights I'd go to bed with nothing but the stale cereal I could sneak out of the cupboard. If I dared complain, Mom would scold me for being ungrateful, while Dad would slam his fist on the table like I was some freeloading roommate instead of his kid. They weren't guiding me through life, they were just surviving day to day and dragging me along for the ride. I remember one time in 4th grade I brought home a perfect score on a math test. Most kids' parents would stick it on the fridge, brag to their coworkers, maybe even buy them ice cream. Mine? Mom barely looked up from the TV. Dad said, "Don't get cocky. One good test doesn't make you smart." Then he went back to arguing with her about money they didn't even have. That's the kind of support system I had. By the time I was 13, I'd learned to keep quiet and stay out of their way. If I didn't, I'd catch another round of screaming about how I was too much responsibility or the reason they couldn't enjoy their lives. They're real nice confidence boosters for a kid, right? The night it all went down. It was hot, sticky, one of those summer nights where the air feels heavy. Dad pulled into a Shell station near the river. Mom turned around in the passenger seat, gave me this fake smile that didn't match the bags under her eyes, and said, "Sweetheart, go wait in the bathroom while we grab some snacks." Something in her voice felt off, but at 13, you don't think your parents are about to ditch you. You think maybe they're actually going to buy chips for once. So I did what she said. I walked into that grimy bathroom that smelled like bleach and sadness, sat on the cracked tile floor, and waited. 5 minutes turned into 20, 20 into 40. At first, I told myself they probably got stuck in line. Then maybe the car broke down. Then maybe they'd circle back and pick me up. I walked out after an hour, stomach growling, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. Their car was gone. Just gone. I sat on the curb under the buzzing neon lights, watching strangers pump gas, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew. They weren't coming back. Not in 5 minutes. Not ever. I don't know how long I stayed there before Rosa, the gas station manager, noticed me. She was this middle-aged woman with tired eyes, but a kind voice. She asked where my parents were. I tried to answer, but the words got stuck. My throat felt like sandpaper. She handed me a half-wrapped ham sandwich from behind the counter. "Eat first, talk later," she said. That was more kindness than I'd gotten at home in years. When she realized I wasn't just some kid waiting on a bathroom break, she called the cops. Sitting in that police station under the fluorescent lights felt unreal. I kept expecting my parents to burst in, act all dramatic, claim it was a misunderstanding. But the minutes ticked by. Then hours. Nothing. They couldn't reach them for some reason. It's like they disappeared. Poof, gone. That's when Uncle Walter walked in. After a couple hours of paperwork and a meeting with a social worker, they released me to him because he was immediate family. If my parents were the picture of failure, Walter was the exact opposite. He strolled into that station in a charcoal suit, shoes polished so bright they practically reflected the overhead lights. He carried this leather briefcase that probably cost more than my parents' monthly rent, but it wasn't the money that struck me. It was the way he carried himself. Confident, calm, like he actually had control over his life. He didn't start with 20 questions. He didn't rant about my parents. He just crouched down to eye level and said, "You're coming home with me." Simple as that. No hesitation, no guilt trip, no conditions. That was the first time I felt like somebody had actually chosen me. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. We drove back to his brownstone on the Upper West Side that night. I remember staring out the window, trying to wrap my head around the fact that I wasn't going back to the crummy apartment where my parents spent their days yelling and ignoring me. Walter's place was nothing like that. The front door alone looked more expensive than our whole old kitchen. Inside smelled like leather and books, not cigarette smoke and spoiled milk. He led me upstairs to a room with a bed bigger than the couch I used to sleep on. There were shelves lined with books and a desk with an actual lamp. He said, "This is your room now. You'll need to fill those shelves with things you like." I didn't know how to respond. My brain was still wired for chaos. I kept waiting for him to snap, to tell me I was temporary, that he'd regret bringing me there. But instead, he just let me settle in. For the first time in my life, I didn't fall asleep listening to yelling through thin walls. I fell asleep in silence, under clean sheets, in a house where I wasn't unwanted. That night, at 13 years old, I realized something important. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. It's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. And my so-called parents? They'd walked away for good. The next morning, I woke up in a bed that didn't smell like stale cigarettes or old takeout. It felt weird, too quiet. No slamming doors, no mom yelling at dad for spending grocery money on whatever stupid thing he bought, no dad stomping around threatening to straighten me out. Just sunlight sneaking through the curtains and the faint sound of footsteps downstairs. I laid there for a while, honestly suspicious of the peace. When your whole life is noise and chaos, silence feels like a setup. But eventually the smell of coffee and toasted bread dragged me out of bed. I wandered down the staircase and into Walter's kitchen. On the table was a plate with scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced fruit. For me. He looked up, nodded once, and said, "Eat before it gets cold," like it was the most normal thing in the world. Nobody had ever cooked me breakfast just because. Mom used to toss me half a Pop-Tart and call it a meal. Dad's idea of breakfast was a warm soda from the fridge. Sitting there at that table, eating food someone actually made for me, I realized how low the bar had been set for my entire childhood. That's when Walter dropped the next surprise. A schedule. "From now on," he said, folding his paper neatly, "your mornings start with breakfast, then schoolwork. After that, chores. Evenings are for reading or chess. Weekends you can relax, but the weekdays are for building yourself." I stared at him like he was speaking another language. My parents had never cared if I did homework, never asked what I was learning, never even came to a parent-teacher conference. To them, school was just a place I went so I wasn't in their way. Now I had a man with a calendar in his hand, explaining how my days were going to run. At first, I thought it was punishment. Then I realized it was structure. He wasn't yelling or threatening. He was planning my life like it mattered. I'll be honest, I wasn't perfect at following it. The first week, I tried to sneak in some TV instead of doing the reading he assigned. He caught me instantly. Instead of blowing up like Dad would have, he just clicked the remote off and said, "Every wasted hour now is 10 you'll regret later. Don't make a habit of it." And that was it. No screaming, no guilt trip. Just a fact, delivered sharp and calm. The biggest test came a month later. Walter had this antique chessboard in his study, something he'd owned since college. Hand-carved pieces, the kind of thing you only touch carefully. One afternoon I was messing with it while he was out. I wanted to practice the moves he'd been teaching me, but I got clumsy. My elbow knocked the board right off the desk. Pieces scattered everywhere, and one of the pawns snapped clean in half. My stomach dropped. My first thought was, I'm screwed. I pictured Dad's face turning red, him screaming, maybe even throwing something at me. I bent down, frantically trying to piece it back together before Walter saw. He walked in right then. I froze. My whole body tensed, waiting for the explosion. Walter just looked at the broken pawn, then at me. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, more like he was analyzing me. Finally, he said, "Why are you panicking?" I broke it," I stammered. "So?" he asked. "That threw me off. It's yours." I ruined it. Walter walked over, picked up the pawn, and set it on the desk. "You didn't ruin anything. You made a mistake. Now you figure out how to fix it." I didn't get it. "You're not mad?" "Mad?" He actually laughed. "It's a pawn. Replaceable. You're not replaceable. Big difference." That moment hit harder than any lecture I'd ever gotten. My parents always made me feel like I was the broken pawn, disposable and annoying. Walter flipped that idea on its head with one sentence. He ordered a new set the next day, but not before sitting me down with glue and tools, teaching me how to repair the old piece. "Value isn't in perfection," he said while we worked. "It's in knowing how to fix what's broken." That stuck with me. The weeks rolled by, and for the first time in my life, I started building actual habits. School came first. When my grades improved, he didn't just say good job and move on. He broke down why it mattered. He showed me how education tied into bigger opportunities: college, business, independence. Looking back, that first year with Walter set the foundation for everything that came later. I used to think my parents abandoning me was the worst thing that could have happened. But sitting there in that brownstone, eating real food, fixing broken chess pieces, following schedules that actually meant something, I started to wonder if maybe it was the best. Because for the first time ever, I wasn't just some burden shoved aside. I was a kid worth investing in. And apparently, that made me a bigger target than I realized. It started small. A plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot one Tuesday afternoon. I grabbed it while sorting the usual junk. Cable ads, a pizza flyer, some catalog addressed to Walter. This one had no return address. Just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. I knew that sharp, loopy handwriting from school permission slips, and notes on the fridge inside was a cheap greeting card. Big shiny letters on the front. Thinking of you. The kind of thing you'd grab off a clearance rack at Walgreens. Inside was written, "Dearest son, we've been thinking about you so much lately. We miss you terribly. Love always, Mom and Dad." I read it twice, waiting for some punchline. 15 years of silence, and this was their comeback? Not even an apology. No explanation for leaving me at a gas station like I was yesterday's trash. Just some Hallmark garbage pretending we were a happy family. I laughed so hard I nearly ripped the card in half. Then I tossed it in the trash. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. My phone started blowing up with voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. Coincidence? Not a chance. First one, Mom's voice. Sugary sweet, fake enough to give you cavities. "Sweetheart, it's your mother. We love you so much. We know we've made mistakes, but families always find their way back together." Second one, Dad's voice. Deeper, trying to sound stern and fatherly. "Son, it's your dad. We need to talk. It's time we put the past behind us. We can fix this." Fix this? Like forgetting your kid in a grocery store aisle. Not abandoning him at 13 and disappearing for over a decade. I didn't bother deleting the messages. I saved them. Not because I cared what they had to say, but because I figured one day I'd want proof of just how pathetic they were. A week later, they got bold. Mom ambushed me at Starbucks. I was grabbing my morning coffee. Same place I always went before work. She walked in wearing a cheap floral dress, caked in makeup like she was auditioning for some community theater tragedy. "Sweetheart!" she squealed, reaching for my arm like she hadn't vanished from my life for 15 years. "Look at you. All grown up. So handsome." I didn't even slow down. I slid past her, took my coffee, and walked right out. Through the glass, I saw her face collapse when she realized I wasn't going to play her little reunion fantasy. 2 days later, Dad tried his luck. He caught me outside the organic market where I bought groceries for Walter's diet. He looked worse than I remembered. Wrinkled polo shirt, gut spilling over his belt, face red from years of smoking and garbage living. "Son," he barked, stepping into my path. "You can't keep ignoring us." I stopped just long enough to give him the kind of look you give gum stuck to your shoe. "Family doesn't abandon kids at gas stations," I said flatly. His face twitched. "We were young. We made mistakes. But we're here now, trying to make things right." That one almost made me laugh. "You were 28 and 30, old enough to vote, drink, pay taxes, and apparently ditch a kid like last week's trash. That's not being young. That's being garbage." He tried again, stepping closer. "We're still your parents." I leaned in, low voice. So he got every word. "No, you're just two strangers who gave me DNA and ran. That's all you'll ever be." Then I walked off, leaving him standing there looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. That night, Walter found me in the study. I was pacing, still fuming from the ambush. He watched me for a while before speaking. "They've resurfaced, haven't they?" I froze. "You knew?" He nodded, eyes sharp even though his body looked thinner these days. "Your father called the house last week. 3 times. I didn't answer, but caller ID doesn't lie. They're keeping tabs on us." I clenched my fists. "They're broke, aren't they?" "That's the only reason." Walter sighed, sat down slowly in his leather chair. "They're circling because they sense weakness. That's what parasites do. And I am weak, at least physically." He looked me dead in the eye. "I have cancer." It hit me like a sucker punch. He said it so calm, so matter-of-fact, that for a second I thought I'd misheard. He held up a hand before I could speak. "I've been fighting it quietly. Treatments, specialists. But it's advanced now. Time is limited." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "So they know. They smelled blood in the water." He gave a thin smile. "Exactly. They think I'll leave them something. They've probably hired someone to dig into my finances, to track you, and now they'll come crawling, begging, pretending to love you, because they believe you're the doorway to my money." I leaned back, letting out a bitter laugh. Then they're dumber than I thought. If they wanted a payday, maybe they shouldn't have abandoned the one person holding the keys. Walter chuckled, weak but genuine. That's why you're ready for this. You see things clearly. No illusions. For the first time in years, I realized how far I'd come from the scared kid sitting in that gas station bathroom. I wasn't helpless anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue me. And when it came to my so-called parents, I wasn't going to give them a single inch. They wanted forgiveness? Too late. They wanted money? Not happening. They'd made their choice 15 years ago, and now it was my turn to make mine. From then on, my focus was crystal clear. Take care of Walter, and make sure my parents never got so much as a whiff of his legacy. Walter's health slipped faster than I wanted to admit. He never complained, but you could see it. The weight dropping off him. The way he'd pause halfway up the stairs. The quiet groans when he thought I wasn't listening. Still, his mind, razor, sharp. He kept his study neat, papers in precise stacks, leather journals filled with his handwriting. Even sick, he carried himself with more dignity than my parents ever managed in their whole lives. One night, as we sorted through bills at his desk, he leaned back and said, "It's time you understand exactly what's at stake." He pulled open the bottom drawer and slid a folder across to me. Inside was an itemized list that didn't look real. Appraised this spring, the brownstone at approximately $4 million, the Hamptons Beach House at $2.1 million, the Vermont cabin just under $700,000, 3 investment condos, a portfolio so thick it made my head spin, stocks, bonds, holdings spread across different accounts. Add it all up, over $12 million. I whistled. I knew you were comfortable, but this is another level. Walter smirked. Comfortable is buying steak once a week. Wealth is making sure the steakhouse pays you rent. I couldn't help laughing. And they think they're getting a slice of this? They think wrong, he said. That's when he called in Charles Bennett, his longtime lawyer. Silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, the kind of guy who looked like he'd never once missed a detail in his career. Bennett laid out the plan on Walter's polished mahogany table like it was a military strategy. Everything will pass to you, Bennett explained, adjusting his glasses. But more importantly, it will be airtight, set up through an irrevocable living trust, a no-contest clause, and even a signed letter of intent documenting your parents' abandonment. Safeguards for every loophole they might try to exploit. I leaned forward. And if they contest it? Bennett smiled thinly. They'll lose. Walter has ensured this estate is bulletproof. I've spent 30 years drafting documents, but this one? This is art. I almost felt bad for my parents. Almost. Of course, they didn't take the hint. A week later, Bennett called me. Your mother showed up at the office, he said, voice clipped. Demanded to see Walter. Claimed she had rights as family. I laughed into the phone. What did you tell her? What I tell all unauthorized parties, Bennett said calmly. That without the client's consent, there is nothing to discuss. Security escorted her out. Good. Let them taste rejection for once. But their persistence didn't stop there. The following Friday, Dad tried sneaking into the building himself. I wasn't there, but Bennett filled me in later. Thomas stormed up to the receptionist's desk, ranting about how he was Walter's brother and owed answers. Within 5 minutes, security had him by the elbows, marching him back to the street. He apparently shouted the whole way down about how the family fortune couldn't be stolen by a kid. A kid. That's all I was to him, even now. 13 when he ditched me. 28 and still dismissed. The irony? I was the one who'd actually earned Walter's trust. One evening, not long after those incidents, Walter collapsed in the hallway. 1 second he was walking toward the kitchen. The next he was on the ground clutching his side. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I scooped him up and rushed him to Mount Sinai. Hours passed in a blur of doctors, machines, and the sterile hospital smell. When he finally woke, his voice was weak but steady. Don't look so grim, he whispered. I'm not gone yet. I sat beside him, gripping the armrest. You scared the hell out of me. He gave me this faint smile. I needed to remind you. Nothing is guaranteed. That's why we prepare. Even lying in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, he was still teaching me, still thinking 2 steps ahead. Later that night, when it was just us, he leaned closer. Understand something, son. This isn't about punishing your parents. It's about defining family. Anyone can share blood. Few share loyalty. I nodded, jaw tight. So this is about sending a message. Exactly, he said, eyes sharp even in his frail body. When I'm gone, they'll realize the consequence of abandoning you wasn't just losing a child. It was losing everything. I sat back, letting that sink in. He wasn't just leaving me money. He was leaving me the final word, the ultimate checkmate. And deep down, I couldn't wait to watch it play out. I didn't have to wait long. A month later, Walter passed away on a Sunday morning. I was sitting beside him when he went. No long speeches, no dramatic goodbyes. He just exhaled one last time, eyes closed, hand in mine. Simple, quiet, dignified. The exact opposite of the people who abandoned me at a gas station. The funeral was set for St. Bartholomew's Cathedral. The place wasn't just full, it was overflowing. His network was deep. Business partners in tailored suits, charity board members, neighbors who'd known him for decades, even the doorman from his building. Everyone had a story about Walter helping them at some point. That's the kind of man he was. And then, of course, Thomas and Ruth showed up. I noticed them the second they walked in. They didn't slip in quietly. No, they made an entrance. Thomas squeezed into a suit that couldn't hide his belly. Tie knotted wrong. Ruth wore a black dress that looked like it had come off a clearance rack, her face caked in cheap makeup. They didn't just sit in the back. They strutted right down the aisle like VIPs, as if anyone in that cathedral actually respected them. I saw heads turn. People whispered. A woman who'd known Walter for years leaned over to me and muttered, "What are they doing here?" Word had gotten around over the years. Walter wasn't shy about why I lived with him. That told me all I needed to know. The crowd already knew who the parasites were. When the casket rolled in, Ruth launched her Broadway audition. She let out this ear-splitting wail and flung herself against the casket like she was Walter's long-lost soulmate. The priest had to pause mid-sentence. Thomas staggered behind her, groaning, muttering, "Oh, Walter, my brother," like they'd been close. The whole thing was a circus. People weren't buying it. You could see the disbelief on their faces. These were people who'd actually been there through Walter's life. Dinners, board meetings, hospital visits. They knew who mattered to him. And it wasn't the two clowns clawing at his casket. I clenched my jaw but stayed seated. Let them embarrass themselves. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium in the Armani suit Walter had insisted on buying me the year before. The chatter died instantly. My voice didn't shake. I didn't talk about the money or the properties. I talked about the man who picked me up from a police station when nobody else cared. The man who taught me discipline, chess, how to stand tall when life tried to beat you down. I ended it with one line. Family isn't DNA. Family is who shows up. It landed. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy. People nodded. Some teared up. A few even clapped softly. And behind me, I heard Ruth sniff loudly, like she was trying to attach herself to my words. After the service, we headed to the Plaza Hotel for the reception. Big room, marble floors. The whole setup fit Walter's style. I moved through groups of people offering condolences, shaking hands, hearing stories I hadn't known about him. I felt proud. Not for me, for him. He'd earned this turnout. Then the inevitable happened. A hand on my shoulder. I turned and found Ruth staring up at me. Eyes watery, smile fake. "Sweetheart," she crooned, "we're so sorry for your loss. Walter was such a generous man, wasn't he? Always giving, always caring." I didn't let her finish. "Yeah," I said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "He was," which is more than I can say for either of you. Her smile twitched. Thomas stepped forward, trying to salvage it. "Son," he said, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. "We all made mistakes. But this is the time to come together. Stick together as a family." I actually laughed in his face. "Family? You ditched me at a gas station when I was 13. You've got no right to that word." A couple of Walter's old colleagues standing nearby raised their eyebrows. The whispering started again, people leaning toward each other. My parents' faces turned white. Ruth tried to play the victim card. "We were young, confused, I cut her off cold. "You were 30, old enough to know exactly what you were doing. You didn't forget me. You left me." That landed harder than I expected. A man from Walter's charity board who'd been listening muttered, "Disgraceful," under his breath. My parents heard it. Their shoulders tensed. Thomas tried one last time. "Look, let's not do this here. There are practical matters we need to—" I raised my hand and stopped him. "Practical matters? You mean money?" "Right. Well, Bennett already scheduled the will reading. Thursday, 2 o'clock, Bennett and Associates. Until then, stay away from me." Then I turned my back on them, just like they had on me. They stood frozen in the middle of the plaza ballroom, humiliated while the conversations around them moved on. People avoided eye contact with them like they had the plague. That was Walter's last gift to me. He made sure everyone knew who they really were. And this was only the beginning. The real show was coming at the will reading. Thursday at 2 o'clock, Bennett and Associates. The place looked like money even before you walked through the doors. Polished marble lobby, security guards who didn't even blink when you walked in, elevators that didn't creak. Walter had spent plenty of time here over the years, and now it was my turn. I showed up early, wearing the tailored navy suit Walter gave me for my birthday. Sharp lines, perfect fit. I looked like I belonged in that boardroom, because I did. My parents? Not so much. They arrived 10 minutes late, and the second they walked in, I nearly laughed out loud. Ruth was squeezed into a knockoff business suit with shoulder pads straight out of the 90s. Thomas had stuffed himself into a navy blazer that strained at the buttons, tie crooked, sweat already soaking the collar. And the way they kept glancing at each other? Like kids about to open Christmas presents. They thought they were about to cash in. Sweetheart, Ruth gushed as they sat down across from me. You look so handsome. Walter would be proud. I didn't answer, just leaned back in the Italian leather chair, calm, steady, letting them twitch and squirm. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened. Bennett walked in, briefcase in hand, glasses perched on his nose, his expression as serious as always. He nodded to me, then to them, and took his seat at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice precise. We're here for the reading of Walter Morrison's last will and testament, executed August 15th of this year. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on the table like a kid waiting for dessert. Ruth tried to look solemn, but her eyes practically glowed. Bennett opened the folder and began reading. First came the standard legal jargon. Sound mind, revoking all previous wills, appointing himself as executor. My parents nodded along like they understood any of it. Then came the inventory. The brownstone, $4 million. Hampton's house, $2 million. Vermont cabin, 3 investment condos. The art collection, the stock portfolio, the wine cellar. It kept going. By the time he hit the 12 million mark, Ruth was breathing fast and Thomas was red in the face, like they were about to faint from excitement. Finally, Bennett cleared his throat and read the key line. I, Walter Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave my entire estate, all properties, accounts, investments, and personal effects to my beloved nephew, who has been the son I never had. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Thomas's smile shattered. His face drained of color so fast it looked like a curtain being yanked down. Ruth's jaw literally dropped. For a second, I thought she might pass out. That can't be right, she whispered. Bennett kept reading, calm as ever. To those who abandoned their child when he needed them most, I leave nothing. Blood relation does not constitute family. Loyalty does. That hit harder than anything I could have said. Walter had written them out, not just legally, but morally, in black and white. Thomas shot to his feet, chair scraping loud against the floor. This is insane. We're his family. We have rights. Bennett removed his glasses and polished them slowly, his version of staying composed. Mr. Morrison, your brother executed this will in full compliance with the law. It is airtight. Ruth's voice cracked. Honey, please, she begged, turning to me. Mascara already streaking. Don't let this happen. We're your parents. We love you. We can work this out. I leaned forward finally. First time I'd spoken since they walked in. My voice was low, calm, cutting. You don't love me. You love the idea of money. You love the lifestyle you think this will buy you. But me? You left me. Remember? Ruth shook her head frantically. We were scared. We didn't know. You were 30, I snapped. Old enough to know exactly what you were doing. Don't rewrite history just because it doesn't pay. Thomas pointed at me, hand shaking. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. You think you can shut us out? You'll see. I smiled. Walter already thought of that. Every trust, every clause, every loophole, closed. You can waste whatever money you've got left on lawyers, but you'll lose. And when it's over, you'll have even less than nothing. The silence after that was beautiful. Ruth sobbed, ugly and loud, grabbing at tissues from her purse. Thomas's hands trembled as he grabbed his phone, probably already Googling cheap inheritance lawyers near me. Bennett slid the stack of documents across the table to me. I picked up the pen and signed slowly, deliberately, page after page, while my parents watched, powerless. Each signature was a nail in the coffin of their delusions. When it was done, Bennett stood and extended his hand. Congratulations. Your uncle would be proud. I shook his hand, then pushed my chair back and stood. My parents looked up at me with eyes that begged, pleaded, but I didn't flinch. You made your choice 15 years ago, I said. Now you live with it. Then I walked out, leaving them behind in that conference room. Two broken people who thought they'd hit the jackpot. only to find out the bank was closed for good. I figured that would be the end of it. Papers signed, will executed, game over. But parasites don't just crawl away quietly. They cling until you scrape them off. Not even a week later, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then another, and another. By the time I checked, there were 5 messages. Mom's voice was first, all wobbly and fake sweet. Sweetheart, we're sorry for how things happened in the past. We just want to fix this. Please call us back. Then Dad, trying to sound tough but desperate. Son, listen. You don't understand how hard things have been. We're family. Family doesn't turn its back. Call me. I didn't call. The next day, they tried again. This time, they showed up outside Bennett's office. Security had to escort them out when they refused to leave the lobby. Bennett called me afterward, his tone clipped but almost amused. They're persistent, he said. But persistence doesn't beat preparation. I almost thanked them for proving Walter right so quickly. But the real low point came a week later. I was leaving the brownstone, heading for a meeting, when I saw them standing on the sidewalk. They looked smaller than I remembered. Older, beaten down. Ruth rushed forward like she'd just spotted a long-lost child in a movie. Please, she begged, grabbing at my arm. We don't want millions, we just need a little help. Rent, groceries, anything. We're drowning. I pulled my arm free. You had a kid who needed rent and groceries. Remember what you gave him? Nothing. Her lip quivered, but she pushed on. We were stupid. We know that now. But Walter would have wanted you to take care of us. That one almost made me laugh out loud. Nice try. Walter wanted nothing to do with you. His will spelled that out crystal clear. You didn't just lose me, you lost him too. Thomas stepped up, voice low, trying to play the man of the house act. Look, you don't have to forgive us, but we're still your parents. You can't just watch us starve. I leaned in, calm, steady, so he couldn't miss it. I can, and I will. For a second, he just stared at me, stunned. Nobody had ever told Thomas Morrison no to his face without backing down. His cheeks turned red, fists clenching like he wanted to lash out. But deep down, he knew it was over. You've got money you don't even need, he spat. And you're really gonna let your own parents rot? Yes, I said flatly. Because you let your own kid rot a long time ago. That shut him up. They didn't chase me after that. They just stood there, broken, watching me walk away. Same way they drove away from me at that gas station years ago. Full circle. Later that night, I sat in Walter's study. My study now. His chessboard was still on the desk, pieces mid-game from the last match we'd played. I adjusted one piece, then leaned back in his chair. My chair. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Kate. How'd it all go? I typed back 2 words. Justice served. Then I set the phone down and pulled open the drawer where Walter kept his watch collection. One in particular stood out. A vintage Rolex he used to wear only on special occasions. I strapped it onto my wrist. The weight solid. Real. A reminder that time is valuable, and you don't waste it on people who wasted you. Outside the window, the city stretched out, alive and loud. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving it. I owned my place in it. My parents thought abandoning me would erase me. They thought showing up years later would reset the scoreboard. But that's not how life works. Choices have consequences. They made theirs at a gas station when I was 13. And now? Now I was a man worth over $12 million, sitting in a brownstone they'd never step foot in, living a life they'd never touch. They wanted forgiveness. They wanted money. They wanted me to save them from the mess they'd built. But the truth was simple. The door had been locked for good, and I wasn't opening it. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.